This week, in an improbable turn of events, the sound of silence went viral. An animated GIF showing an electrical tower jumping rope over delightfully bendy power lines began to spread. The frenzy started when Lisa de Bruin, a researcher at the Institute of Neuroscience and Psychology at the University of Glasgow, posed this question when she asked Twitter users in an unscientific survey whether they could hear the image, which actually lacks sound. Like most animated GIFs, nearly 70% who responded said they could. Once you heard it, it was hard not to start noticing that other GIFs also seemed to be making noise, as if the bouncing pylon had somehow jacked up the volume on a cacophonous orchestra. Few had noticed before. But can you actually hear something that does not emit a sound? Certainly, said Chris Plack, a professor of audiology at the Manchester Centre for Audiology and Deafness, who researches acoustic reflexes and auditory processing. Hearing, as he defines it, does not require external noise, rather, it is having the experience of a sound. Over the past few years, Elliot Freeman and Chris Fasnage, cognitive neuroscience researchers at the University of London, have been studying what they call visual evoked auditory response, or visual ear. The ability to hear is not limited to scenes where one would expect to hear a noise, they say. One lab study found that more than 20% of people could hear flashing lights in silent videos. A range of motions, abstract patterns, and even colors evoke sound for some. The act of hearing a visual highlights the trippy fact that our senses do not operate the way we often assume, with crisp boundaries between them. Smelling, hearing and tasting all speak to each other and influence each other, so little things like the color of the plate you're eating on can influence how food tastes, said Mr. Fasnage. It may feel like the world is right in front of us, he said, but it's not so simple. But what is going on when we hear? And what is it about that particular GIF that makes it so loud for so many? Rob DeSalle, an evolutionary geneticist and curator of the Our Senses exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History, calls it a clever illusion caused by filling in. Our brains see this and they say, wow, a pylon of that size bouncing up and down should be making a noise, he said. So we hear one. Mr. Fasnage agreed that there is something about the pylon's GIF that makes it particularly easy to imagine what it might sound like. Visual hearing is often about some intersection of perception, memory, and imagination all coming together, he said. But how do you explain the fact that some people can hear visual recordings of flashing lights, motions, and other scenes that might be silent in real life? Why do some people have much more advanced hearing than others? It's too early in the research to say. But Dr. Freeman's and Mr. Fasnage's working theory is that the degree to which one can hear based on visuals likely has to do with how much a given person's visual and auditory areas talk to each other in the brain using electrical brain stimulation. We have also found tentative signs that visual and auditory brain areas cooperate more in people with VEAR, while they tend to compete with each other, in non-VEAR people, Dr. Freeman said in an email. So people who claim to hear visual motion have brains that seem to work slightly differently. Individuals with frequent or advanced VEARing may have a form of synesthesia, a neurological phenomenon in which one sense feeds into another, he said. In other types of synesthesia, sounds might be linked to colors or words with tastes. Having this particular kind of synesthesia may be confusing for individuals who don't realize what's going on. That was the case for Dr. Freeman, who said he hears most things that move or flash. When he inquired if others could hear the buzzing of flashing lights emitted by a distant tower, for example, he got quizzical looks. So I stopped asking people. Then he came across a paper by two neurobiologists at Caltech, Melissa Sines and Christoph Cook, often credited with first discovering the form of synesthesia he experiences. Their paper convinced him he was not a lone weirdo, and that the topic was worthy of additional investigation. At synesthesia conferences, he's met others who have even more pronounced visual hearing, most notably Lydell Simpson, for whom the world is a very noisy place. Though he is technically deaf, everything I see, taste, touch and smell get translated into sound, he explained over email. I can never shut it off. His hearing may be so advanced because before he was fitted for a hearing aid as a toddler, the auditory bits of his brain were learning to process vision instead, and when they got the hearing aid, sound and vision fused in his brain, Mr. Fasnich said. Even for those with just average hearing, the sound of a flash of light can be powerful enough to drown out real-world sounds. The researchers have found in their lab it's also possible that those of us who grew up surrounded by noisy environments have been hearing based on visuals for years without realizing it, Mr. Fasnich added in an email. I might assume I am hearing the footsteps of a person walking on the other side of the street, when really the sound exists only in my mind, he said. The noisy pylons GIF, in that sense, reveals that we have this unusual ability and that some of our daily soundtrack may actually be rooted in imagination.